Chapter 61. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Uchiha Xingliu almost popped his eyes out when he heard this. He is only 6 years old, and you are telling him about a wife, isn't it a bit too early? After Uchiha finished speaking, he felt that it made sense. Although he was shocked to see Uchiha Xingliu's mangekyo, he didn't say what he was going to say at the beginning, but Uchiha Xingliu has such a strong talent, it is also very good to tell him about a wife first. Not only can his excellent bloodline be passed down, it can also make Uchiha Xingliu, who has already changed his camp, move his camp slightly towards Uchiha. Uchiha thought that his granddaughter Uchiha Jiji was a good candidate for his wife, so he said directly. Xingliu-kun, my Jiji has always admired you, why don't you two look at each other? Uchiha Xingliu closed his Sharingan and rolled his eyes, saying unhappily. I'm only 6 years old, there's no rush at all. And Jiji is in the same class as me, so don't lie with your eyes open, okay? Uchiha still smiled when he heard it, and didn't feel uncomfortable at all. Oh, you two are in the same class, so this is fate. Since we are so destined, how about getting engaged first? Uchiha Xingliu no longer wanted to care about Uchiha. His current goal is to sell Jiji to Uchiha Xingliu. No matter what he said, Uchiha would lead him in this direction, but there was another person present, Uchiha Xien. Although he was also shocked by Uchiha Xingliu's talent, his thinking was not as fast as Uchiha-ang's. Uchiha Xien first brewed a cup of tea for Uchiha Xingliu, gave an apologetic expression, and then walked to Aang's side and said. Father, we have something important to discuss now, please calm down. Hearing this, Uchiha finally calmed down. Thinking of his impolite behavior just now, he quickly drank tea to cover up his embarrassment. For a while, several people in the room fell into a weird and awkward situation. In the end, it was Uchiha Xingliu who broke the awkwardness. He put down the tea in his hand, looked at the two people opposite, and slowly said. I think Chief Ang asked me to come here to introduce me to a wife. If there is anything, please speak directly. Uchiha looked at the boy in front of him with a slightly complicated look. If it weren't for the fact that his head and face looked like a child, who would believe that the person in front of him was a child? He first added some tea to Uchiha Xingliu, and then said. Although Xingliu-kun has opened the mangekyo, do you know? Anyone who opens this I will eventually become blind. Uchiha Xingliu certainly knew this information, although he had no way to get another pair of blood relatives mangekyo to turn him into an eternal mangekyo. But his autoplay system can also eliminate this drawback, so Uchiha Xingliu is not worried about this problem at all. Uchiha naturally didn't know what the person sitting opposite him was thinking. According to his idea, after learning this news, Uchiha Xingliu would panic for a while no matter how mature he was. No one can accept losing this power after getting the power of the mangekyo. Uchiha was waiting for Uchiha Xingliu to respond, but he obviously didn't expect that Uchiha Xingliu had already understood it. He couldn't wait for a reply, so he couldn't help asking. Aren't you worried, Xingliu? You are only 6 years old this year. If you keep going like this, you may be blind before you reach adulthood. Hearing this, Uchiha Xingliu glanced at him and said lightly. Don't worry about it, Chief Ang. I'll take care of my own affairs. If there is nothing else, I'll leave. After saying that, he tidied his clothes and stood up. Just as he was about to remove the seal and leave, Uchiha finally told his purpose. Xingliu, haven't you ever thought about becoming a Hokage? As soon as these words came out, Uchiha Xingliu stopped moving. In fact, before coming here, he had thought that the purpose of Uchiha looking for him was probably to make him a Hokage. After all, a Hokage belonging to the Uchiha clan can greatly satisfy the clan's inner need for glory, so after knowing that he is likely to open the mangekyo, the first target will naturally be the position of Hokage. Although Uchiha Tsurayu's future goal is also this, he wants more. He doesn't want Uchiha to become Hokage, but the Hokage accepts Uchiha. The two concepts cannot be confused. Uchiha Tsurayu turned around and looked at Uchiha who said this. At this time, he had the demeanor of a clan leader. If Xingliu-kun is willing to get engaged to my granddaughter, the Uchiha clan will fully support you to become Hokage. Hearing this, Uchiha Xingliu laughed, even laughed out loud. Uchiha frowned, and the hand holding the teacup clenched, because he heard disdain and ridicule from this laughter. Sure enough, the next moment he heard what Uchiha Xingliu said, which made him lose his mind. What gave you the illusion that I need your support to become Hokage? And what gave you the confidence that you will be controlled by you? As soon as he finished speaking, the terrifying chakra gushed out, forming an air wave that blew away everything around him. The ground under his feet also cracked like a spider web, and a strong pressure descended on Uchiha Ong and the other person. The instinct of the creatures warned them, and every cell in the body was shouting, "Stay away from the people in front of them." Uchiha Ong could not imagine that this short boy in front of him could give him such a feeling. At this moment, he remembered whether he had underestimated Uchiha Tsuryu. Sarutobi Hiruzen and Danzo, who was executed by him, were tripped by the man in front of him. Sarutobi Hiruzen was killed silently by him in public. If they were not from the same clan, they would not have found out. He not only accomplished what Uchiha wanted to accomplish, but also accomplished it better. Even the experiment of opening the Sharingan in the Uchiha clan was related to Uchiha Tsuryu. Now Uchiha Ong recalled his performance, which was really stupid. At first, he wanted to use the secret of Mangekyo's blindness to control him. After that plan failed, he tempted him with the position of Hokage, but he never thought that Uchiha Tsuryu actually didn't need Uchiha's help at all. It was the Uchiha clan that needed Uchiha Tsuryu. The Uchiha clan originally admired the strong, and such a person was worthy of their following. After figuring out everything, a hint of determination flashed in Uchiha Aang's eyes. He walked in front of the laughing Uchiha Xingliu, knelt on one knee and said, "Master Xingliu, the Uchiha in the future will always support you." Chapter 62. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Uchiha Xingliu looked at the scene in front of him and retracted the chakra that enveloped his whole body. He knew that his goal had been achieved. Uchiha Ong had come to him for a purpose, and he was willing to take the risk of being targeted by Uchiha Madara to come to Uchiha. Naturally, he also had his own purpose. Although the Uchiha clan has been criticized in various ways, in fact, this clan is sometimes just a little arrogant. The inner pride makes them unforgiving, but as long as you get his approval, he will really treat you as a close friend. This clan is not like others. If they get their approval, they will really dare to go up to the people they recognize, and the Uchiha, who was famous in the Warring States period, was not in vain. One-on-one, must escape. This is the ninja world's affirmation of the Uchiha clan, which was forged by the blood of the enemy. So Uchiha Xingliu certainly hopes that this power can be used for himself, and now, his goal has been achieved. He said to Uchiha Ong, who was kneeling on one knee with his head down, "Can you represent Uchiha?" Uchiha Ong raised his head, looked at the person in front of him who had put his life on the line, and said, "I am the representative of the doves of the Uchiha clan, and I am also the clan leader of the clan. I can represent Uchiha." Uchiha Xian was hesitant to speak, and wanted to say something but didn't want to offend his father. Uchiha Xingliu grinned and did not comment on Aang's answer. Although he was not very clear about the current situation of Uchiha, he knew Uchiha Setsuna. With this person, it is unlikely that Uchiha will have only one voice. However, since Uchiha Ong said so, Uchiha Xingliu believed it. If there is a problem in the future, the person who made the promise at this time will be responsible. I'm curious. Uchiha Madara was stronger than me at that time. Why didn't you choose him? Why did you choose me now? After all, I'm just a child and can't bring anything to you at the moment. Why do you want to bet on me? After hearing this, Uchiha Xian also looked at his father. He also wanted to know the answer to this question. Uchiha Ong chuckled and said slowly, "Although Madara-sama founded Konoha with the first generation, the village only respected Hashirama-sama, and was in awe of Madara-sama. Hashirama became the first generation because of the expectations of the village. Madara-sama has no chance of becoming Hokage. He does not have this talent." When Madara-sama wanted to take the clan away, all countries had already completed the creation of ninja villages. Wherever we go, we are just grabbing other people's cake. In addition, the tribesmen's desire for peace and the uncertainty of the future, so they did not go with Madara-sama. At this point, Uchiha Ong stood up, walked in front of Uchiha Xingliu, and looked into his eyes. "And you, Xingliu-kun, you are very different. You are not gifted, but a strong man who has fulfilled your talent. And you have the highest chance of becoming the next Hokage. Because the whole village is expecting you to become the next Senju Hashirama and protect Konoha for decades. Besides, it's not that you don't have anything to give us, but you have already given it. Hearing this, Uchiha Xingliu was a little confused. Did he give anything to Uchiha? He himself didn't know about it. Uchiha saw his doubts, and then told him what happened in the Uchiha clan after Uchiha Ji opened his eyes. Uchiha Xingliu nodded in understanding after hearing it, and then silently made a note of Ji in his heart. When talking about how to design the eye-opening plan, Uchiha saw that he seemed to be quite interested in this, so he chatted a few more words. These 2 extra sentences gave Uchiha's eye-opening plan a new way to play, because Uchiha Xingliu proposed that it is not necessary to have the sad emotion of the death of parents and relatives, but other emotions can also be used. For example, fear. Some Uchiha who are afraid of ghosts can ask others to dress up as ghosts to scare him. Then take a camera to take pictures and make second-hand preparations. If he still doesn't open his eyes at that time, expose his social death scene back and forth. This is the emotion of anger. Uchiha Xien looked at the 2 people who were talking more and more excitedly with the eyes of a devil, especially when they were talking excitedly. They also laughed, which made him get goosebumps all over the floor. Time passed slowly in the conversation of several people. When it was afternoon, Uchiha Xingliu stopped with a sense of unsatisfaction when he thought of his own things. Looking at the person in front of him who was dozens of years older than him but had similar interests, he could not help but sigh. I didn't expect that Chi-Fong would have such a great talent, but 2 have something else to do today. Let's talk next time. Uchiha was also very satisfied. Since he has decided to put his fortune on Uchiha Xingliu, he naturally hopes to get closer to him. Now that the 2 of them have common topics in this regard, they can barely be considered confidants, but even if they are confidants, they are still not as close as relatives. Thinking of this, Uchiha's original idea came up again. He looked at Uchiha Xingliu who was retracting the seal and said, "Xingliu Jun, what do you think of my original proposal?" Uchiha Xingliu was busy retracting the seal. When he suddenly heard this, he didn't think much about it, but answered subconsciously. "What proposal?" "Oh, it's an engagement proposal. My family's governance is also very good. Why don't we become closer relatives?" Uchiha Xingliu had just taken back all the seals and put his mind back on it. After hearing what Uchiha said, he tilted his head and looked at him with a black mind. "Why did you bring him back to this topic again? Is he really a genius? Can you bring him back to this topic?" He shook his head, shaking off this idea and showing his refusal. "No, I am just a classmate with Julie for now, so let's talk about the future later. I prefer free love, both of us are willing, so forget it." Actually, Uchiha knew that this would not work when he shook his head, but when he heard it with his own ears, he was still a little disappointed, but he didn't force it. It would be best if he agreed, but he wouldn't lose anything if he didn't agree, and Uchiha Xingliu, who had basically achieved his goal after everything was settled, naturally said goodbye. After he left, Uchiha Xien came to Uchiha and said, "Father, do you think so highly of Xingliu?" Uchiha smiled contemptuously and slapped him on the back of his head. Then, in Uchiha Xien's puzzled eyes, he said, "What if I were your father? Xingliu might surpass Madara-sama in the future." Then, he didn't explain to him why he would surpass Uchiha Madara. Just like that, with his confused expression, strode away. Chapter 63. You are listening at novelfull.audio. On the other side, Uchiha Xingliu came to the Hokage building after lunch and found Uzumaki Mito. At this time, she was discussing something with the 2 of them. Seeing Uchiha Xingliu coming in, her eyes lit up and she said to the person in front of her, "This is the creator of the medical talisman I told you about, Uchiha Xingliu. If you have any questions, you can ask him. I have something else to do, so I'm leaving first." After that, Uzumaki Mito walked out without looking at the strange expressions of the people present. When passing by Xingliu, he gave him a look to perform well. He looked so bloody that he turned into a hyuga, but he felt bad the next second. There were 2 fiery sights coming towards him after Uzumaki Mito finished speaking. The heads of the sealing department and the medical department looked at him enthusiastically, as if they were looking at their lovers. In a fierce argument, the 2 people refused to give in to each other. Finally, they decided to walk to Uchiha Xingliu together and introduce themselves to him. The head of the SEAL department is a member of the Uzumaki clan who came to Konoha with Uzumaki Mito. His name is Uzumaki Nori, and he is of the same generation as Mito. The head of the medical department is a member of the Senju clan, and he is also of the same generation as Mito. His name is Senju Keiho. After they finished introducing themselves, they ignored everything else and started asking Uchiha Xingliu questions about the medical talisman. Although Uchiha Xingliu came for this, he was still a little overwhelmed by the constant questions from these two people. Now he finally understood why Uzumaki Mito wanted to run away at the beginning. At this moment, he felt Chisha's pain. So he started to swing directly. Uchiha Xingliu waved his hand and interrupted the chattering of the two people in front of him. Then he took out a scroll from his arms, put it on the table, and said to the two people who were somewhat puzzled. This is the production process of the medical talisman. You can discuss it by yourselves. I have something to do, so I will leave first. After that, Uchiha Xingliu in front of the two people disappeared with a bang. When he decided to start, he had already replaced himself with a shadow clone and then quietly slipped away. With his current strength, it is easy to do this. This operation made them stunned by Uchiha Xingliu's operation and stared at each other. After a while, Uzumaki Nori broke the silent atmosphere. He sighed and said, "He has the same personality as Mito. He makes all kinds of excuses when something happens." Senju Keiho echoed. "That's right, it really deserves to be a family. Will Tsunade be like this in the future?" As they said, they looked at each other again and saw the helplessness in each other's eyes, but the people ran away, and they had no choice but to pick up the scroll and read it. This sight fascinated them and made them forget everything else. After leaving his shadow clone and running away, Uchiha Xingliu had nowhere to go, so he returned to the Senju mansion. When he walked into the yard, Uzumaki Mito was sitting there, drinking tea and basking in the sun, looking very comfortable. Tsunade and Nono were also here at this time, and they were practicing separately, but Chinatsu, who had always been with Uzumaki Mito, was not here. As for where, Uchiha Xingliu knew the answer without thinking. It is impossible for the Hokage to have nothing to do. Since the Hokage does not do anything, someone has to do it. Could this person be someone else besides Chinatsu? Uchiha Xingliu thought of this and mourned for Chinatsu for 0.1 second, then he walked to the side of Uzumaki Mito, took a chair and sat on it. Then he skillfully picked up the teacup, poured a cup, and drank it slowly. Uzumaki Mito glanced at him from the corner of her eyes, wanting to say something, but in the end, she didn't say anything because she didn't have enough confidence. After all, she herself has been yo-yoed, how can she not let others run away? Since they are of the same nature, naturally there is no confidence to blame Uchiha Xingliu. After realizing this, Uzumaki Mito gave up thinking. With this time, it is better to enjoy life more. For a while, both of them lazily enjoyed the afternoon sun bath, squinting their eyes and drinking tea. Tsunade and Nono looked at this scene strangely, especially Tsunade, who was practicing strange power, wiped the sweat from her forehead, and always felt a little unbalanced in her heart. Think about it. You are in military training, standing in military posture, sweating profusely under the scorching sun. Suddenly, someone in front of you is holding a watermelon popsicle and opening a parasol, enjoying it slowly in front of you, especially if you come in a group. How do you feel? She hadn't been beaten for a month, and the more she thought about it, the more uncomfortable she felt. Her eyes rolled, as if she had thought of something. Tsunade stopped practicing, ran to Uzumaki Mito and said, "Grandma, I have been practicing for such a long time, but I still haven't figured out the key points. I need someone to guide me. Grandma, can you practice with me, please?" Uzumaki Mito's squinting eyes widened a little, looking at Tsunade who was acting like a spoiled child, and laughed. She knew that Tsunade was unwilling and wanted to ask someone to help her. If it was before, she really couldn't refuse this request. After all, it's her own child who wants to work hard and make progress. As an elder, can you not agree? But now, isn't there someone who can guide Tsunade? Thinking of this, Uzumaki Mito looked at Uchiha Xingliu on the side. Uchiha Xingliu actually knew what Tsunade was going to do when she just spoke, but this is the world of ninjas. What made Tsunade have the illusion that she can't have a shadow clone? So just as Uzumaki Mito looked at him, a shadow clone appeared with a bang. Really, if you don't want to let the clone go, won't anyone speak for the clone? And after the removal, you still have to experience these experiences again. Uchiha Xingliu's shadow clone has appeared, and he began to complain about the original body. Of course, although he said so, he still honestly guided Tsunade's training, although Tsunade was a little disappointed when she saw Uchiha Xingliu's shadow clone, but she was not disappointed to the end, and her goal was achieved, just like the shadow clone said. The clone's experience will be transmitted back to the original body after disappearing, so this is also a success of the plan. Uchiha Xingliu certainly knows the characteristics of the shadow clone, but he knows what it is for. Tsunade's move can be called an open conspiracy. There is no solution at all, there is the shadow of Senju Tobirama, so in order to prevent this situation from happening again in the future, he has already hung the shadow clone in the system. Nono looked at their interaction with some envy, and was also a little tempted, but finally gave up the idea. After all, she was still an outsider, not as close as them, but the next moment, she suddenly felt that the sunlight in front of her was blocked while she was practicing. Nono looked up and saw Uchiha Tsuryu in front of her, smiling at her. Chapter 64. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Uzumaki Mito looked at Uchiha Tsuryu next to her with strange eyes. She had experienced everything since she was a child. She had never seen this scene before. If Hashirama Senju had this EQ, she would not be able to stop the other swarmers. If Hashirama Senju was not too simple, stupid, maybe he only had Madara in his heart, Uzumaki Mito would not be able to stop those women who came to her automatically. In fact, she was overthinking. Uchiha Tsuryu did not have this EQ at all. He just felt that he had been tired, so he might as well treat everyone equally, so he simply split 2 clones, one for each person, which was fair. After doing all this, Uchiha Tsuryu calmly drank tea again. This scene made Uzumaki Mito's eyelids jump, and she felt that he was lazier than herself. Just when they thought that the afternoon would pass like this, Chinatsu and an umbu ran over in a hurry. Lord Mito, there is an urgent report. Hearing this, Uzumaki Mito changed her lazy look. She stood up and looked at the 2 people who came with sharp eyes. Chinatsu took out a document, handed it to Uzumaki Mito and said, "There is intelligence that the shadows of other countries had private contacts in the previous month, but the specific content has not been discovered. And today, an envoy came to Konoha and conveyed the idea of the other 4 shadows to hold a 5-shadow meeting. This document is the formal invitation from the 4 shadows." Uzumaki Mito didn't say anything after listening, but just opened the document in his hand and read it carefully. The more he looked at her, the more cautious his face became. Then, she said to Chinatsu, "It seems that we have to hold another Jonin meeting. Chinatsu, please go and call all the Jonin who are still in the ninja village." Chinatsu also understood the importance of the matter. She nodded and left with the umbu who came with her. Uzumaki Mito looked at Uchiha Tsuryu who came to her side at this time, and after thinking about it, she decided to ask his opinion. After all, he had many good suggestions in the previous incidents, so Uzumaki Mito did not regard him as a simple child. "Tsuryu, the 4 shadows want to negotiate, and the address is chosen in the Iron Country. What do you think of this matter?" That when Uchiha Tsuryu first heard about the peace talks, he thought it was possible to try, but when he heard that the address was in the Iron Country, he said without thinking, "You can negotiate, but you have to choose the address yourself, and you can't choose the Iron Country. Uchiha Madara is now very likely hiding in the Iron Country. If Uzumaki Mito is allowed to go, what if Madara thinks this is an opportunity to recover the 9 tails and kill the other 4 shadows?" Uchiha Tsuryu dare not think about how chaotic the ninja world will be at that time. Even if he goes with them, he may accidentally hurt the other 4 shadows. That would not be a peace talk, but a war. Although he was not afraid, time was on his side. In a few years, everything would be smooth sailing. Why should we cause unnecessary sacrifices and troubles now? Uzumaki Mito saw that he was so resolute, and he also thought of something. It was during the peace talks that Tobirama Senju was ambushed by Kinkaku and Ginkaku, and finally died for the future of Konoha, and now there is intelligence that the other 4 Kages have private contacts. If we give them the address to choose again, it would be too unsafe. Although she had a wrong idea, she agreed with this proposal. So Uzumaki Mito nodded and agreed with Uchiha Tsuryu's statement. Uchiha Tsuryu breathed a sigh of relief after seeing her nod, then he fell into thinking, this time the peace talks must be negotiated. the specific division of interests must be negotiated on the spot, and he, a 6-year-old child, is definitely not suitable for such occasions. So Uzumaki Mito probably won't bring him with him to the peace talks this time. He suddenly had a flash of inspiration and thought of a brilliant idea, so Uchiha Tsuryu continued to speak. I remember that Lord Tobarama created the Chunin exam to assess whether genin is qualified to be promoted to Chunin. The purpose of the peace talks is definitely to divide the benefits, so why not let the strength speak for itself? Unite the 5 villages to hold this Chunin exam together, and then divide the benefits based on the results of the exam. No matter what the result is, the other villages will have nothing to say. Uzumaki Mito's eyes lit up when he heard this. Indeed, as Uchiha Tsuryu said, this method is not only fair, but also acceptable to other villages. Let the strength speak for itself. If they are not satisfied, they can only accept this fact. If they can't beat others, they will naturally get less benefits, which is very fair. So, she touched Xingliu's forehead and praised him. Xingliu is really smart. The suggestions he made are very good. I will bring them up at the meeting. After saying that, she glanced at Tsunade and Nono who were still practicing, and then said. They will be handed over to you. Don't worry, Grandma Mito. After getting Xingliu's reply, Uzumaki Mito left, and Uchiha Xingliu naturally returned to his original position and basked in the sun, but not long after, he slapped his forehead and said regretfully. It's bad, I got myself into trouble. The method that Uchiha Xingliu thought of to jointly hold the Chunin exam to distribute the benefits is good, but just now, time was tight and he forgot to think deeply, but now he thought of it. Since this activity determines the distribution of benefits, it must be very important, and in order to ensure that their village can win, each Kage must send the strongest people of the younger generation to participate. Even if the Jonin participates in this exam, it is not too much. Others don't know. Can Uzumaki Mito not know? At this time, the strongest of the younger generation of Konoha is the 6-year-old Uchiha Tsuryu. Therefore, Uzumaki Mito will definitely use him as insurance. This is also the reason why Uchiha Tsuryu just regretted. Sure enough, capable people have to work overtime wherever they are. For a while, Uchiha Tsuryu sighed, and Tsunade on the side was very happy. She thought it was her plan that made Uchiha Tsuryu look like this now. Little did she know that Uchiha Tsuryu's clone had already written it down for her when he saw her so happy. Time passed quickly, and after dinner, Uzumaki Mito finally came back, after eating the meal that Chinatsu left for her. Uzumaki Mito found Uchiha Tsuryu and talked to him about the content of the meeting. First of all, the proposal that the site of the 5 Kage meeting should be selected by Konoha was agreed by all the staff. After all, the lesson of Senju Tobarama is still in front of us. Secondly, the plan for the Chunin exam he proposed was also approved by most people. The meeting was held so late because they were discussing the candidates for the exam. Uzumaki Mito had asked him to come for this purpose. She wanted him to be the backup person. Chapter 65. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Although it is still early to jointly hold the Chunin exam, and the 5 Kage conference has not yet been held, but the theme of this meeting is peace talks. Uzumaki Mito's appearance on the stage has already made the other ninja villages cautious. This time, inviting her to participate in the peace talks is proof of this. What's more, the news that the daimyo gave money and reputation has not yet spread. When this news spreads, the major countries will be even less willing to fight with Konoha. At that time, a solution to the distribution of interests will be needed, and this relatively fair exam can still be accepted by the major ninja villages. After all, the young people of Konoha's current generation are not as unsolvable as the older generation. Uzumaki Mito believes in the new generation of her village, but for Konoha's absolute victory, she thought of Uchiha Tsuryu. Although the specific strength of Uchiha Tsuryu is still unknown, it can be confirmed that he will not be weaker than the Kage. So, of course, Uchiha Tsuryu was pitted by his own suggestion. Uzumaki Mito looked at Uchiha Tsuryu, who looked like he had lost all hope in life, and couldn't help but laugh. Don't worry, you don't have to go out, it's just a safety precaution. Uzumaki Mito paused and took out a scroll from somewhere. The scroll was half a person's height. Uzumaki Mito picked it up and put it in front of him and continued. I originally wanted to wait until you grow up a little before giving it to you. But you are so strong now, I think this thing should be usable. Xiao Xingliu, have you heard of immortals? That when Uchiha Xingliu heard this, he knew what Uzumaki Mito had taken out. It should be the spiritual scroll of the wet bone forest, one of the 3 holy places. However, although Uchiha Xingliu knew about this thing, it didn't stop him from shaking his head to deny it. His previous experience couldn't have made him know this thing. Strength can be explained by talent, but he couldn't explain this kind of secret. Uzumaki Mito was not surprised to see him shaking his head. After all, this was something that only a few people knew, so she began to tell Uchiha Xingliu about the mystery of the immortals. Xingliu, do you know that this world is extremely vast? There are 3 holy places on this continent. Each holy place is led by an immortal, namely the Slug Immortal, the Great Toad Immortal and the White Snake Immortal. These immortals have lived for more than 1,000 years, and their strength is unfathomable and difficult to estimate. These holy places are where people learn the Sage Mode. It was only after Hashirama learned the Sage Mode that he was able to sweep the world and be unmatched. This is the spiritual scroll of the Slug Immortal's holy place, the Wet Bone Forest. Now I give this thing to you, and I hope you can also master the Sage Mode. Uzumaki Mito's voice was full of expectations for Uchiha Xingliu. She took a deep breath, as if to pour out all the memories in her heart. However, Uchiha Xingliu was not particularly interested in the Sage Mode, because he already had the autoplay system, a way to improve his strength, but considering that this was someone else's good intention and that he might use this scroll in his plan, he still accepted it. When Uzumaki Mito saw him accept it, her face was full of relief. She believed that with Uchiha Xingliu's talent, he would definitely be able to learn the Sage Mode. In this way, even if his future strength could not surpass Hashirama, it would be enough to protect Konoha. Then, Uzumaki Mito continued to explain the matters about the Chunin exam. She suggested that Uchiha Xingliu use a disguised identity to participate in the exam. If Konoha's contestants were outstanding and could handle it smoothly, he only needed to watch the battle from the sidelines, eat melons and watch the show, and finally give up. However, if an emergency occurred and someone needed to step forward, Uchiha Xingliu must appear in time and stabilize the situation. Uchiha Xingliu naturally agreed to Uzumaki Mito's proposal. He felt that it was not a big deal to just save the situation at the critical moment. And he felt that the possibility of this happening was very low. Speaking of the guarantee to reduce this possibility, it was Hatake Sakumo, also known as White Fang. Although he had just graduated, his reputation had spread throughout Konoha. Even before he graduated, he was already known as a little genius in Konoha. The Chunin joint exam would definitely not be held immediately, because the 5 nations would not act rashly. They would definitely not miss this opportunity to promote the village. So this incident would be delayed for at least half a year, and this period of time was enough for White Fang's strength to reach a higher level. As long as the other 4 Kage did not send out Jinchuriki for this special contestant, White Fang should be able to easily deal with others and win. At that time, this place in the competition will be just a VIP viewing position. Just when Uzumaki Mito thought that everything had been arranged and was ready to leave, Uchiha Xingliu suddenly asked, "Can Tsunade sign this scroll?" Uzumaki Mito stopped her steps and turned around and replied, "Of course, but you have to remind her to do what she can and not to overconsume chakra to practice summoning. Moreover, this scroll is like Senju's collection. Since it has been handed over to you, you have the right to decide where it goes." After saying that, she left without waiting for Uchiha Xingliu's response. Uchiha Xingliu nodded silently. This feeling of being trusted is like a warm current, which fills his heart with joy and determination. He knows that this is a recognition of his strength and an expectation for his future. He will also respond to this expectation with practical actions. Time flies by, and half a month has passed since the invitation from the 4 Kages to attend the 5 Kage conference was received. During this half-month, the location of the 5 Kage conference was finally confirmed after repeated discussions and negotiations. As the representative of Konoha village, Uzumaki Mito is ready to go to the meeting place. During this period, Uchiha Xingliu initially mastered the Flying Thunder God technique. Although there are some pre-swings and post-swings when using this technique, and the consumption of chakra is also quite huge, he can indeed use it freely. This breakthrough achievement made him find Uzumaki Mito on purpose the day before she left. When Uchiha Xingliu handed the shuriken engraved with the Flying Thunder God seal to Uzumaki Mito, a hint of surprise and joy flashed in her eyes. She knew clearly what this shuriken represented. With it, this meeting is guaranteed, and Uchiha Xingliu's growth is even more exciting. Uzumaki Mito was filled with emotion. She knew that Uchiha Tsuryu was growing fast, but it was still amazing that he could learn Flying Thunder God so quickly. Chapter 66. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In fact, Uchiha Xingliu was surprised that he could learn the Flying Thunder God technique so quickly. Although his sealing technique has met the prerequisites for learning Flying Thunder God, this technique requires more than just the ability of sealing technique. A wide range of spatial perception and affinity for space are essential. Without this perception, you cannot sense the existence of the Flying Thunder God seal, which means that this technique is impossible for you to master. Without sufficient spatial affinity, when you travel through space, you may not be able to ensure that you can appear at your destination intact. These factors set a high threshold for learning the Flying Thunder God technique, but fortunately, Uchiha Xingliu has these necessary talents and abilities. He guessed that it might be the blood of the Otsutsuki that gave him a weak spatial ability, and the travel also enhanced his talent. Otherwise, he would not have been able to learn and use Flying Thunder God in such a short time. However, Uchiha Xingliu did not worry too much. After all, the result was good. On this day, Uchiha Xingliu showed unusual behavior. He did not use the shadow clone technique to go to school as usual, but chose to go to the ninja school with Tsunade and Nono. This change surprised Tsunade, and she showed an expression of disbelief on her face. Uchiha Xingliu shrugged nonchalantly, thinking it was just a small matter. In fact, he originally planned to let a group of people skip classes together. After all, Dokichi's teaching was obviously not suitable for geniuses like them, but considering that this might cause unnecessary trouble and misunderstanding, he finally did not do so. Of course, it was just temporarily not done. For example, today, he was going to take a group of people to skip classes together to implement the plan of guiding Jiraiya. On the way to the ninja school, Uchiha Xingliu had a good chat with Tsunade and Nono. They talked about the latest ninja news, interesting things in school, and each other's growth experience. Xingliu found that it was not bad to do this occasionally. As they chatted, the ninja school was already in sight. The three of them walked into the classroom and looked closely. Orochimaru and Jiraiya had already arrived. Jiraiya was talking to Orochimaru cordially, and it was unknown what they were talking about. This scene made Uchiha Xingliu sigh. It is worthy of being a famous bond in Naruto, but it was just right that they were all here, and the plan could be implemented. Thinking of this, Uchiha Xingliu walked up to them with Tsunade and Nono. "What are you doing?" Hearing Uchiha Xingliu's voice, Orochimaru's eyes lit up. He looked at Jiraiya with a bit of disdain, then broke free from Jiraiya's embrace and said, "Jiraiya has been pestering me to teach him some ninjutsu. You know, all my ninjutsu are given by you, and I won't show them to others without your permission. But Jiraiya is too stubborn and keeps pestering me." Speaking of this, Orochimaru looked helpless and embarrassed. Jiraiya scratched his head a little embarrassedly, and he said a little embarrassedly, "I can't help it. The teacher refused to teach me ninjutsu and said that it's not the right time yet. I just think that Orochimaru seems to have mastered many ninjutsu, so I want to ask him for advice." After hearing this, Uchiha Xingliu's eyes lit up. This was simply a pillow for someone who was sleepy. This situation was just right for him to implement his plan. He looked at Jiraiya, who was a little shy, and said, "Although Orochimaru has some ninjutsu, these are all obtained by exchanging his own things with me, so I can't teach you casually. However, I can take you to practice together. Your current foundation is not very solid, and you need to work harder. Are you willing to join us?" Jiraiya's eyes flashed with joy after hearing this, and he nodded without hesitation to show his willingness. Seeing Jiraiya nod, Uchiha Xingliu secretly said that he had taken the bait. He looked at several people and said slowly, "In this case, let's practice together today. Anyway, Dokichi's teaching method is not very helpful to us." Hearing this, several people nodded in agreement. The first few months of the opening of the ninja school have been enough for geniuses to widen the gap with most people, but the teacher will not speed up the progress because of a few people. Otherwise most people will not be able to keep up, so now the teacher's teaching is a waste of time for them. In the original story, the three ninjas graduated at the age of 6. Instead of still studying in the ninja school like now. All this, of course, is because of Uchiha Xingliu. For the three ninjas, Uchiha Xingliu was so strong that he did not choose to graduate, and how could they graduate when there was still a big gap between them and Xingliu? Seeing that everyone agreed, Uchiha Xingliu took them to the training ground of Senju. Orochimaru was still the same. After getting the new ninjutsu scroll given to him by Uchiha Xingliu, he went to study it alone. Tsunade and Nono originally wanted to practice alone, but were stopped by Uchiha Xingliu. "Today, I will give you a good thing." As he said that, he took out the summoning scroll of the wet bone forest. After spreading the scroll, the names of Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Xingliu were listed. In the two people's puzzled eyes, he explained. "This is a summoning scroll. After signing your name, you can use the summoning technique to summon a summoned beast to help you fight. You sign first, and I will teach you how to use the summoning technique after signing." After hearing his explanation, Tsunade and Nono also showed a look of understanding. They have heard of the summoning technique. They also believe in Uchiha Xingliu and believe that he will not harm them, so the two of them signed their names on the scroll one after another. After the two of them signed, Uchiha Xingliu also began to teach them how to use the summoning technique. Soon, they successfully used it. Although the summoned slugs were smaller than each other, it was also a successful start. Jiraiya was more and more envious. So after writing down the seal of the summoning technique, he also began to try, and this attempt seemed to start the turn of fate. With a bang, Jiraiya disappeared on the spot. After seeing Jiraiya disappear, the others were all stunned. They had never seen a scene where they could make themselves disappear by practicing ninjutsu. Jiraiya was still their good friend after all. They were a little worried when he suddenly disappeared. Uchiha Tsuryu was not worried at all, because he knew that Jiraiya had already arrived at the place. That would change his fate, so after comforting the others, he began to waiting for the information that Jiraiya would bring back after he came back. Chapter 67. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Unlike the calm waiting of Uchiha Xingliu, Jiraiya's heart was in a panic, full of worries and uneasiness. He just tried to use this ninjutsu with the mentality of satisfying his addiction, but he didn't expect that as soon as he used it, he felt an irresistible strong force that suddenly pulled him into the time and space channel. At that moment, Jiraiya felt that his body was instantly sucked by a powerful vortex. Then the surrounding scenery became blurred, and all the sounds around him disappeared. Only his rapid heartbeat echoed in his ears. He was horrified to find that he could not control his body, as if he had lost his freedom. The wonderful experience of traveling through time and space made Jiraiya feel dizzy and nauseous. He didn't know where he would be sent, nor did he know if he could return to his original world. A moment could also be a long time, and Jiraiya couldn't tell how much time had passed. He appeared in Myaboku Mountain in a trance. When Jiraiya came back to his senses, the scene in front of him made him stunned again. At this time, he was in a dense forest, and the trees in the forest were particularly tall. Their branches and leaves swayed in the sun, as if greeting every passerby, and in this forest, there were some clear streams from time to time. The gurgling stream reflected the surrounding green grass and trees, which seemed particularly peaceful and beautiful. Jiraiya looked up and looked far away. On the distant mountain, a magnificent waterfall was rushing down like an upside-down Milky Way. The water flow of the waterfall was stirring on the rocks, splashing layers of water mist. Under the sunlight, these water mists shone with brilliant light. Just as he was immersed in this scenery he had never seen before, a fart voice suddenly came from his feet. "Hey, who are you? How did you get here?" This woke Jiraiya up, and as a ninja, he was alert and quickly moved away from where he had just stood. After doing all this, he looked down at the place where the sound came from. He saw a small, dark brown toad staring at him. Seeing that Jiraiya was slow to answer him and looked alert, the toad curled his lips disdainfully and said, "Human, answer my question." Jiraiya opened his mouth wide when he saw the toad talking, and then shouted, "Ah! The toad has become a spirit." Hearing this, several well characters suddenly appeared on Gamabunta's face. All the toads in Myaboku Mountain wanted to become immortals, and suddenly heard someone say that they were monsters, so they were naturally angry. The more it thought about it, the angrier it got. The next moment, it jumped up and hit Jiraiya, and this unexpected hit also knocked Jiraiya to the ground. Looking at it with a confused face, after venting his resentment, Gamabunta calmed down a little. Just when it wanted to continue asking Jiraiya something, it saw an old toad appeared next to it. "Okay, Bunta, the master wants to meet this human." The appearance of this toad made Bunta's face change immediately. The face that had just been rude to Jiraiya now looked at the old toad in front of him with respect. Senjin Fukasaku, why are you here? Senjin Fukasaku laughed and explained. The master just woke up and asked me to come here to pick up a guest. Hearing this, Bunta was shocked and pointed at Jiraiya who was lying on the ground and said. It can't be him. Jiraiya was even more confused at this time, and he couldn't help but point at himself and looked at Senjin Fukasaku in confusion. Senjin Fukasaku was made to laugh at Jiraiya's funny actions, but after laughing, he still confirmed the idea of one person and one toad. It walked in front of Jiraiya and pulled him up. Then Fukasaku led Jiraiya to the place where the great toad sage was. On the way, Fukasaku briefly introduced to him where this place was. When he learned that Jiraiya had arrived here through the summoning technique, Fukasaku sighed, and then told Jiraiya. If you don't sign the summoning beast in the future, it's best not to use this technique. You are lucky this time, otherwise I don't know where it would run to. Then, it briefly talked about some knowledge about the summoning beast, which made Jiraiya more and more excited. He knew that he had encountered a place that was hard to come by, because Fukasaku said that there are 3 holy places for summoning beasts, and this is one of them, Mayaboku Mountain. So when he was about to reach the destination, Jiraiya made a request to Fukasaku. Fukasaku, can you let me sign the summoning scroll of Mayaboku Mountain? When the immortal Fukasaku heard this request, he did not answer Jiraiya immediately. He just looked at him deeply and pushed open the door of the destination. You can only make a decision after you meet the master. After that, he took Jiraiya in. As soon as Jiraiya entered the room, he saw a huge orange toad sitting on a stone chair. The toad looked very old, and its skin was wrinkled. There was a string of Buddhist beads around its neck, with a lavender cat's eye in the middle, and the word oil was written on it. There was also a doctoral hat on his head. At this time, the toad was dozing off, nodding his head. Immortal Fukasaku walked in front of him and said loudly. Master, the person you want is here. Immortal Fukasaku knew the personality of the toad immortal very well. If the voice was not loud, it would not wake him up at all, so this time, it used all its strength, and this sound did not disappoint it, waking up the big toad sage. Seeing that it was about to wake up, the sage Fukasaku waved to Jiraiya, signaling him to come over. When Jiraiya walked here, the big toad sage finally opened his eyes. It looked at the man and the toad in front of it in confusion, and said in a voice that was not awake yet. Who are you? For a moment, the scene fell into an awkward situation. Are you old and confused? This is Fukasaku, don't you recognize it? Shima sage stood aside, covering his forehead with a headache, his face full of helplessness. Oh, it's Fukasaku, what's the matter with you? This question immediately put on a mask of pain for the 2 sages. Fukasaku held his chest, which was about to have a heart attack, and coughed and said. Master, you asked me to pick up a guest, remember? Hearing this, the great toad sage nodded with a look of realization and looked at Jiraiya on the side. Then, as if he was lost in memories, he said in an erratic tone. Child, I saw some fragments of your future. You will have a disciple in the future, who will bring great changes to the ninja world. And one day, you will be forced to make a major choice. And this choice will lead to your apprentice's choice, whether to bring peace to the world or complete destruction. Thanks to all the book friends for their support and rewards, which have increased the score of my book. Save my life, this chapter is counted as an extra chapter, thank you again Ors. Chapter 68. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The words of the great toad sage echoed in Jiraiya's ears like the sound of an ancient bell. For Jiraiya, who was only 6 years old, he had not yet experienced the cruelty of war and had not yet deeply understood the heaviness of life. Therefore, those words about fate and choice were still just some vague concepts to him. However, Jiraiya did not completely ignore these words. On the contrary, he listened attentively. Although he could not fully understand, he could also feel the importance and profound meaning of them. He knew that the words of the great toad sage were telling him that he had some special power. His choices and actions would likely affect the fate of others, and for him at this age, child of destiny is undoubtedly an extremely cool word. It represents a mysterious power, a power that can influence the world. Although he did not understand what this meant, he could feel that he seemed to have been given some important mission. So, although these words were still a little vague to him, he chose to remember them in his heart. He believed that as he grew older and gained more experience, he would gradually understand the true meaning of these words. At the same time, after the great toad sage said those words, some doubts also surged in his heart. He felt that Jiraiya seemed to come to Myaboku Mountain too early this time. Yes. This time, the great toad sage's ability to predict was not groundless. As a sage, he has a strong ability to predict and can accidentally see what he has experienced in other worlds in his dreams. These other worlds are different from the time and space nodes where he is, so he can understand some key events common to the world. He had foreseen that Jiraiya would definitely come to Myaboku Mountain by chance, and that Naruto, the child of destiny, would definitely be born. However, he had never seen Jiraiya come to Myaboku Mountain at such a young age. This strange situation made the great toad sage feel a little uneasy. He began to wonder if there were some unknown factors affecting all this. Thinking of this, the great toad sage slightly opened his vicissitudes eyes, looked at Jiraiya, and asked softly, "Little Jiraiya, how did you get here?" Jiraiya was embarrassed when he heard this question. He answered hesitantly, "I was summoned here when I was practicing the summoning technique. I didn't know that I couldn't use the summoning technique like this." Hearing this answer, the great toad sage couldn't help but feel relieved. Although Jiraiya's arrival was not at the scheduled time, but the cause and result of the incident were exactly the same, which made him put down the worry he had just mentioned. At this time, Jiraiya seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly shouted and asked in confusion, "I haven't told you my name yet. How do you know my name?" Hearing this, Shima Sage on the side held his forehead, sighed and said, "The master just told you what will happen in the future. How could he not know your name?" Jiraiya stopped talking immediately after hearing this. He scratched his head awkwardly and covered his discomfort with a dry laugh. After clarifying Jiraiya's situation, the great toad sage felt relieved, and then fell into a drowsy state again. Just when he was about to fall asleep completely, he suddenly said, "Jiraiya is the teacher of the child of destiny. He can sign a contract with Myaboku Mountain. Fukasaku, give him the scroll." Hearing this instruction, Fukasaku sage immediately took out a scroll from his arms and handed it to Jiraiya. Jiraiya took the scroll, his heart full of anticipation and excitement. He knew that the thing he had been thinking about was in his hands. After the great toad sage finished speaking, he did not wait for their response and immediately fell into a deep sleep. This light-speed sleep made several people feel helpless and their heads were full of black lines. They looked at the great toad sage who fell into sleep and couldn't help but sigh at the unique character of this sage. At this time, the immortal Fukasaku gently patted Jiraiya on the shoulder, indicating that he could leave. Jiraiya nodded, carefully picked up the scroll, and followed the immortal Fukasaku out of the cave of the great toad sage. After leaving the cave, the immortal Fukasaku said to Jiraiya, "This scroll is the spiritual scroll of Myaboku Mountain. You can sign your name on it now." Jiraiya heard it, and a hint of excitement flashed in his eyes. Then, under the guidance of the immortal Fukasaku, he solemnly signed his name on the scroll. After completing all this, Fukasaku the immortal walked up to Jiraiya and told him, "Young man, if you encounter difficulties in the future, you can communicate with us through this scroll. Now, you should go back." Jiraiya was still immersed in the excitement just now. After hearing the words of the immortal Fukasaku, he gradually came back to his senses. When he was about to ask the immortal Fukasaku how to go back, he suddenly felt a familiar pulling feeling. The next moment, Jiraiya only had time to leave a sentence come back and disappeared again. After a familiar feeling, Jiraiya's consciousness returned to the training ground of Senju. He opened his eyes and immediately saw Uchiha Xingliu and several companions surrounding him. They showed strange expressions on their faces. This strange look made Jiraiya feel a little uneasy, and a sense of uneasiness surged in his heart. He immediately stood up and asked nervously, "What's wrong? Why are you all looking at me like this?" Several people looked at each other and shook their heads to deny, as if to indicate that nothing was wrong with him. Finally, it was Orochimaru who answered Jiraiya's doubts. "You are really brave. You dare to practice summoning like this. Aren't you afraid that you will never come back?" Jiraiya was stunned by Orochimaru's words. He realized that they were looking at him as a fool who didn't know how to live or die. Jiraiya felt his face quickly turn red, and he retorted angrily, Not knowing is not stupid. I don't know what's wrong. Can ninja things be considered stupid? Then there were some words like I don't blame those who don't know and how can I know if you don't tell me? Everyone laughed, and the surroundings were suddenly filled with a happy atmosphere. After the noise, before Uchiha Xingliu could get Jiraiya to say anything, he began to talk about his bizarre experience. As the details he described gradually unfolded, Tsunade and the others couldn't help but widen their eyes, revealing a trace of disbelief. He used the summoning technique recklessly, and after being summoned away, he actually encountered Mayaboku Mountain, one of the 3 sacred places for summoned beasts. In the end, he even signed a contract with it. This made the others marvel at his luck. Chapter 69. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Uchiha Xingliu expressed his surprise like everyone else, but in his heart he was listening carefully to Jiraiya's experience. When he heard the prophecy of the great Toad Sage, Uchiha Xingliu finally let go of his guard. He understood that the ability to predict must have limitations, but the most feared thing is the great Toad Sage and the Six Paths Sage, as powerful and terrible as described in some fan works. If that were the case, everything Uchiha Xingliu did would be just a passing cloud, and could not change his fate. But now, since he was not mentioned in the prophecy at all, it proved that they were not as powerful as imagined. At least, they could not predict and change everything. They could not maintain the normal development of this world like the way of heaven. In this case, outsiders like Uchiha Xingliu might have an impact on them and change the original plot. Therefore, Uchiha Xingliu's heart gradually calmed down, and he realized that he did not have to worry too much and be on guard. He could continue to pursue his goals and explore this world. At this moment, Jiraiya's noisy voice interrupted Uchiha Tsurayu's thoughts. It turned out that after telling his own experience, he couldn't help but want to show everyone the summoning contract he signed. He excitedly formed the seal of the summoning technique, then slapped the ground and shouted, "Ha, look at Uncle Jiraiya! Summoning technique!" That with a bang sound, a puff of smoke appeared. After the smoke dissipated, a tadpole appeared in the summoning array of the summoning technique. Everyone saw this scene, looked at each other, and then laughed. Uchiha Tsuraayu couldn't help laughing. After that, he began to instruct Jiraiya to practice. As a reward for bringing him information, others also began to practice. At the same time, Uzumaki Mito and others who had been on the road for a long time finally arrived at the location of the 5 Kage conference. At this time, the Kages of the other 4 countries had already arrived, and only Uzumaki Mito came the latest. Since everyone was here, ninjas were not the type to procrastinate, so, the second 5 Kage meeting of the ninja world officially began. Compared with the first time, the 5 Kage this time had many different faces. The first ninja world war was the one with the most Kage deaths. The second Raikage and the Hokage were ambushed by Kinkaku and Ginkaku and both died there. The second Tsuchikage and the second Mizukage died together in the fight. Only the second Kazekage shaman was the only second generation who was still alive. It can be said that although this war was not as cruel as the later ones, all the deaths were high level. When the meeting began, the Kages of various countries took their seats one by one, with serious and earnest expressions on their faces. They all knew that this meeting would determine the direction of the ninja world in the future. Therefore, everyone participated in it very cautiously and seriously. After sitting in silence for a while, it was finally Uzumaki Mito who broke the silence. She looked at the Kage and said, "Everyone, the 5 Kage conference is not for us to sit here and stare blankly." She paused and continued. "We all know that this war needs to end at this time. We can't fight anymore." The Wind Kage shaman, who was sitting next to Uzumaki Mito, nodded and agreed with her. Then shaman said, "Yes, since we have decided to sit at the negotiation table, it means that we have all tacitly agreed to this. So, let's put an end to this war." The Raikage was a hot-tempered man. When he heard this, he slapped the table and said loudly, "You are talking nonsense. If it ends like this, what will happen to our second generation?" He was killed while negotiating with the Hokage. Although Uzumaki Mito knew that the Cloud Ninja was shameless, after all, for a ninja village like a gangster, how righteous can you expect him to be? But she had never seen such a scene where the villain complained first. "Let's not talk about the ambush that killed the second generation Senju Tobarama, just say that the ambushers were from their Kyumogakure, and she hadn't sought revenge on them yet." But the Raikage dared to turn the tables. This really made her unable to react for a while. and she fell into silence, of course. If she knew that the Kumogakure would kidnap Hinata under the slogan of peace talks in the future, if it failed, they would wrongly accuse Hyuga of killing the envoy. It would not be surprising, as the Reikage finished speaking, the third-generation Mizukage and the third-generation Tsuchikage Anoki also quarreled, their shadows died together in a fight. This kind of hatred is obviously not something that can be resolved by sitting down and talking. Just now the atmosphere of the meeting, which was as calm as water, suddenly became like solidified air, suffocating. At this moment, Uzumaki Mito's anger finally broke out. Her eyes became as sharp as knives, flashing with a sharp light, staring straight at the third Reikage. Third Reikage, do you want to confuse right and wrong? Uzumaki Mito's voice was cold and firm, revealing an unshakable determination. Golden chakra gradually formed on her body, as if bathing in a violent flame, which was daunting. For Uzumaki Mito, the death of Senju Tobarama has always been like a thorn in her heart. Senju Tobarama was killed during the peace talks. How could she accept such an ending? Originally, for the sake of the overall situation, she could still endure it, but the remarks of the third Reikage made the anger in her heart erupt like a volcano. The murderer was not only from the Kumogakure, but what was even more unacceptable was that the third Reikage actually wrongly accused the second. This act of confusing right and wrong and confusing the audience made Uzumaki Mito unable to suppress her anger. She was ready to fight the third Reikage and seek justice for Senju Tobarama. Seeing that Uzumaki Mito was ready for battle, the third Reikage did not hesitate to start refining chakra. He knew the powerful strength of Uzumaki Mito and did not dare to be careless. At this tense moment, Uchiha Eng's eyes suddenly lit up and turned into the shape of Uchiha Star Flow Kaleidoscope. Then, a ball of violent flames burst out from his eyes, cut through the void, and then dissipated in the air. Although this flame was short, it made everyone present feel terrified. I saw that where the terrifying flame had just passed, tiny black marks slowly healed. Everyone present was a tough guy. The weakest ones were all elite jonin, so they could tell at a glance that the black lines were space cracks. Several Kages who had seen the horror of Uchiha Madara could not help but tremble in their hearts. They remembered the nightmare, and now, this terrifying power appeared again. Chapter 70. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Although it is not decades later, Uchiha Madara's name is still well known in the current ninja world, and his eyes are different from those of ordinary Uchiha, and of course he is also very well known. The eyes that just appeared in Uchiha Eng's eyes are undoubtedly the same kaleidoscope as Uchiha Madara. These eyes are different from ordinary Uchiha eyes. They have unique abilities and characteristics. This is also one of the most well-known characteristics of Uchiha Madara during his lifetime. When these eyes appeared in Uchiha Eng's eyes, everyone present instantly became calm. They knew that the power of these eyes was definitely not something that ordinary people could contend with, especially Anoki, who had witnessed Uchiha Madara's natural disaster-like power. His body trembled unconsciously. Fortunately, the rest of the people did not notice these details. They were all attracted by Uchiha Eng, and they all looked at him vigilantly, so they naturally had no energy to pay attention to such small details. This also saved Anoki and others' face and prevented them from losing face in front of everyone. After all, as a shadow, you can die in battle, but you can never flee without a fight. When Uchiha Eng just showed his Mangekyo, Uzumaki Mito was just surprised for a moment, and then she regained her composure. She knew that this pair of Mangekyo was not Uchiha Eng's eyes, but Uchiha Seiyu's. In fact, her judgment was correct. The ability of this pair of Mangekyo is exactly Uchiha Seiyu's pupil technique. Brahma, in this Five Shadows conference, in order to ensure the safety of Uzumaki Mito, Uchiha Seiyu made many preparations. He not only used the obvious strategy of flying Thunder God Kunai to prevent Uchiha Madara from suddenly attacking, but also sealed his pupil technique in Uchiha Eng's eyes through the transcription seal. The trigger condition of the left eye is when Uzumaki Mito is about to fight. This is Uchiha Seiyu's speculation that this meeting may not be so peaceful. After all, in the Five Shadows conference in later generations, there was not even a war at that time, and the Five Shadows were incompatible with each other, let alone now. Therefore, the biggest role of this eye is to give other shadows a warning, so that they can calm down and listen to other people's opinions. Uchiha Xingliu believes that in this era, the same Mangekyo as Uchiha Madara can calm most people down. The left eye has a transcription seal, and of course the right eye has one. Unlike the left eye, although the right eye is also sealed with Brahma, it is a healing attribute, and the triggering condition is that Uzumaki Mido is injured. When both seals are triggered, Uchiha Xingliu will quickly rush to the scene through Flying Thunder God. Because both seals are triggered, it means that Uzumaki Mido is already injured at this point in time. In addition to Uchiha Madara, the only thing that can hurt Uzumaki Mido is the rest of the shadows together to deal with her. When this happens, although it is not the right time, Uchiha Xingliu does not mind letting the other 4 countries change a shadow, recreate the situation where Uchiha Madara intimidates the entire ninja world. Fortunately, the sudden appearance of the Mangekyo made the other Hokages return to their initial calmness. Even the Reikage, who had just shown an attitude of fighting, sat back in his original position. Although the Reikages of previous generations were rough, they were actually delicate. In fact, even if the Uchiha Star Stream's Mangekyo did not appear, he would not have fought with Uzumaki Mido. He just said this matter first in order to gain more benefits in the talks. After all, as Uzumaki Mido said, the second Hokage was killed by the Cloud Ninja during the peace talks with the Reikage. The Cloud Ninja was inherently at fault in this matter, and it would be very disadvantageous for them to be said during the negotiations. Most people might acquiesce in this, but the third Reikage chose the second way, that is, to say this matter first, to reverse black and white, to muddy the water, so that Uzumaki Mido could not use this matter to make the Cloud Ninja give in. After all, if you lose a Hokage, his Cloud Ninja village will also lose one. The third Reikage knew this very well, so he planned to make a fuss about this matter at the beginning of the meeting. However, he failed to gain anything, as Uchiha Xingliu had already predicted that the 4 Kages would make trouble. He directly showed his power to them, which made them alert, and also weakened Konoha psychologically. After all, one Ninetales Jinchuriki was strong enough, and now there was a Mangekyo, and the ability of the Mangekyo was this kind of fire that could cut through space. If this ability was used for sneak attacks, none of the 4 Kages present dared to say that they could dodge it. If they couldn't beat them, they could only talk to them nicely. Uchiha Xingliu's move directly made the talks that were about to explode again. Sitting back at the negotiation table, Uzumaki Mido could think clearly about these things. Some things are bottom lines that cannot be easily touched, so she took a deep breath and asked the third Reikage in a steady tone. What you just said, is it an opinion expressed as a shadow, or your personal opinion? That the third Reikage looked at Uzumaki Mido's serious face and instantly realized that he might have touched the other party's bottom line. He knew in his heart that as a shadow, his words and deeds represented the attitude and position of the entire village, and what he said just now, although the original intention was to protect the interests of the village, but he did not consider Uzumaki Mido's feelings at all, which led to the current situation. However, as a shadow, he also had to maintain his dignity and honor. It was indeed embarrassing and shameful for him to give in so easily. However, when he thought of the heart-pounding kaleidoscope ability, the kind of fire that could directly cut through space, he couldn't help but feel awe in his heart. As the third-generation Reikage, he was most proud of his impenetrable defense and unparalleled attacking ability. However, this unreasonable fire ability that cuts through space directly seemed to exist specifically to restrain his defense. Moreover, Uchiha's 3 Magatama Sharingan can greatly enhance dynamic vision, not to mention the Mangekyo, so his speed could not be brought into play, which made him understand, if he went to the battlefield for a life-and-death duel, he would probably die under these eyes, and the Cloud Ninja lost him. And now that the next generation has not grown up, even if the rest of the village will not stand by and watch. But it is unrealistic for them to face the Ninetales Jinchuriki and the Mangekyo, and the village can't stop this natural disaster at all. Therefore, after a psychological struggle, he gritted his teeth and said in a muffled voice, "I said it personally, sorry." Hearing this, Uzumaki Mido snorted coldly, dispersed the layer of golden chakra protection on his body, and calmly sat back in his original position.